Hey guys, it's been quite a while since I uploaded my last video back in January, and for those not in the know, I was off to South Korea and Japan over the past few months, and now I'm spending most of my time in self-imposed quarantine in what's soon to be known as prime coronavirus territory. And even though I arrived early this month, and there hasn't been any videos since then, and let's just say got slightly distracted, to say the least. But all is not lost. Even though I took a break, WS definitely hasn't. Goblin Slayer came out to English, a new English original set also got announced, and the Japanese side of the game got dumpster fired by the most recent badness update, along with my word and everyone else in my locals when the annual preview stream came out and announced a plethora of shiny new sets. Anyhow, talk about things that I've missed. Didn't I have a game about one of those decks recently? Why not make something quick and easy while I'm still in quarantine back home? And hopefully it's not jank. Oh shit. Alright, before we get started, a quick disclaimer. Let me first preface that this deck tech in this list is not entirely standard. If you're looking for a generic standby gate deck, this is not the video for you. One could say it's incredibly tailored to the builder's greedy preferences, but I don't have a choice because, well, it was on the video. What can I do? Because of the time most of this video was made before I took a plane to Weebland, all the official translations were not made or known or available. So card effects may be worded differently, or the official name might be different, but they're all the same. No one really refers to the official card name anyway, it's always that level 1. The game plan of this particular deck list is to fetch out your pieces for your early play game for level 2, stall your opponent out for dealing any damage, then finishing them off shortly after. Even though this deck list is a little bit quirky, a variant of this list went to a top 4 standard tournament by being the only neo-standard legal deck in top 4, which is relatively impressive. This deck is more greedy than others as it splashes yellow purely for the Musashi. If you want a deck list, you can take a screenshot or check the link in the description down below. At level 0, you want to ensure that we deal with our opponent's threats while setting up for your level 1 game plan. We run 4 of the early play conditions, which we'll get to later, which is a Rize which enables us to fix our hand. You also run a pair of chases that both deals with our opponent's troublesome openers such as Suiciders, while avoiding clean cuts and presenting a solid body on either side of the turn cycle. Also included are a pair of Cowgirls, which are essentially Arasus from Idolmaster CG, to filter and hand fix. The Sword Maidens here also help buffer other characters to run over our opponent's larger threats, while ensuring that we always keep at least one character back to swing with if our board gets cleared early. Keep in mind she can also buffer herself if the situation requires it. Rounding out the tour of includes is this Priestess, which is our primary search brainstormer, with sometimes relevant trinket text. While you might think running 2 brainstormers is questionable, we need not fear, as our first singleton is our salvage brainstorm with actual trinket text, as we don't run the climax combo for this card. We run it at single to give us the utility of having a way to salvage while keeping our brain slots in order. The remainder of our singletons are pure utility, giving access to on-demand self-refresh, hand filter for torches that will fetch with a level 1 climax combo, and a generic drop searcher to do what they do best, find what we need while providing a decent discard outlet. Note that many of our level 0s have a way to check the top card of our library, which becomes quite important later on as the main premise of a deck relies on us knowing what we reveal when we trigger later down the line. At the time of recording, this particular PR card may not be available in English, so feel free to bump any of the level 0s up a slot according to your preference, as this is a guide so not a bible, so feel free to do as you please. At level 1 we run the backbone of any Slayer deck worth its salt, Goblin Slayer himself. Duh. This effectively 6k card climax combos with a gate, or door, wherever your local would like to call it these days, and it allows us to search our library or our waiting room for a particular card named Torch. This card allows us to either Akatsuki on our opponent's turn, or in our main phase, because events can be played main phase, or to move one of our opponent's characters to a board position of our choosing, if the slot happens to be open. Keep in mind to use this card you need a Goblin Slayer on the battlefield, so if your field's full of Priestesses then you're out of luck. We run a ratio of 3 to 1, as the counter is essentially the plus, and the singleton is the utility choice which loses its potency if we have more than one copy, as we prefer to plus more, and the card is dead in multiples. And since it's not uncommon for us to triple Goblin Slayer, well, we can choose whatever we like. We also run 2 backups to defend our board, as 6k on defense is serviceable, and a singleton support that allows us to defend our board on our opponent's turn while helping us beat over our opponent when we combo off, as we target 2 characters instead of the usual 1. To see how this might work in practice, let's consider a hypothetical level 1 board that looks like this. Now, before we slam our climax down, we need to ensure we have mental awareness of where our events are, as if they are in our clock or in our stock, then we can't fetch them with our climax combo, and we can whiff if we aren't paying any attention. It's also a good idea to check your waiting room first before attacking so we know where to search. Afterwards, we can safely play our combo to buff our Slayers to run over what our opponent has while fetching our events from either our deck or our waiting room. On our opponent's turn, we can either mill ourselves out if we are out of climaxes, or counter to keep our combo around and to attack our opponent's back row on the next turn. Don't be afraid not to use the event if you think you're well compressed, as remember, events can always be played in the main phase. So now, let's move on to level 2. Here, we run mainly utility cards as our level 3s, which we will get to, are our main level 2 gameplay. We run a pair of memory counters that help defend our board while dealing with other early game threats that can be recurred, as well as a singleton anti-change suicide of the bottom decks. The memory or bot deck clause helps stifle early play yours or any Hina player still left alive after the last ban list restriction. We also run a single copy of a level 3 support with Bond flavor text, as we don't run the card in this deck. This card is quite useful as it helps support the main game plan of our deck here at level 3. And talk about level 3, here it finally is. This is a centerpiece of our deck, the early play Priestess. She is an early play if you have our aforementioned level 0 in the clock, and has a climax combo to gain power and give global minus soul at our opponent's attack phase. The deck revolves around this card, resolving its effects and staying around so our opponent can't deal any damage. You want to expend your opponent's resources in bashing in with a large wall that is both hard to deal with either soul or power, and combine this with your back row to make it nigh impenetrable. She also replaces herself by drawing 2 and discarding 1 on play, which makes it easier to find copies of her climax combo if need be. A useful tip when dealing with the Priestess is to set up your early play by keeping a true bond in your hand early, as the deck needs it to play its game plan effectively. You don't want to torch for the card, as the upside is higher if we find it to use better targets. As this card is effectively a red color requirement past level 1, you can prioritize blue or your greedy yellow in your clock, as you run enough red not to worry about it as much. Also note that this card has an alarm ability which allows us to look at the top 2 cards of our deck and plan our attacks accordingly. Keep in mind that we need to reveal an order character or an event off the top of the library for the climax combo to go off. Don't be afraid to side if you fear an anti-change counter or are facing a wall that is difficult to deal with, as we need to ensure she stays around and the effect still triggers whether she fronts or sides. It is quite likely your opponent will probably crash into her while dealing no damage on the crackback, leaving us to swing in unhindered on the next turn. Don't be afraid to play out your priestesses and keep them in the back row if we don't hit our climaxes. You would also need to consider where we are at our first level 2 turn. If we don't have the resources to push, it's better to wait a turn rather than slamming headfirst to early play. The Goblin Slayer level 1 combo is still pretty good, and there is no point risking our priestesses for no value if we don't need to. We also run a pair of trial deck healers which just well, heal, and a singleton of the back row which also heals, gives global power, and allows us to look and rearrange our top deck to deal exact or to set up our priestesses from earlier. One thing that you might think might be off of this deck list is that we run a play setup of color Musashis, which generally do a good job at finishing games. Keep in mind that in this deck we only run 6 yellow cards, which is excessively greedy, although seeing that this card is the only card we need to effectively put on the board, don't be afraid to clock it early to enable the condition. Our climax spread is 4 pants 4 gate, which helps us either find our pieces or salvage a combo from our yard if we happen to trigger it. As for the deck's weaknesses, the deck has a hard time dealing with massive walls past level 2 if we can't run over them, or are forced to run over them if our opponent is attempting to bait an anti-change opportunity. We can't outwall the wall deck. The level 3 combo also doesn't work if your opponent can remove our priestesses in play or ignore them entirely before the attack phase. Think of Mega Man level 3 that straight up kicks at the clock, or any on-play bounce ability. Keep in mind a negative soul doesn't counter auto burns, such as Sinon or the ever-present Yor, which we still need a ban list in English by the way, Bushi. In these difficult matchups, we have to rely on our splash Musashis, as we can't reliably outwall or outgrind our opponent. This deck can also brick if we don't prioritize our color correctly for our clock. Keep in mind this list only has 6 yellow cards, so we need to manage our clock efficiently if we are to play anything. Also consider for this deck to run hot, you need to continue to climax combo out, and in a deck where you can't search for your climaxes as you don't run Rumias, because they don't exist, it may be difficult unless you luck sack into them. Overall, even though this deck is not the most optimal deck for the series, it's a really fun starting list for those who want to experiment. One can try to cut the yellow entirely to run a standard blue-red deck, or to try something of your own measure. So what do you think about this deck list? Let us know by giving us a comment down below. You can also follow us on Twitter, and if you have any inquiries just hit me up with an email. Either way, stay safe and stay the hell back home.